Who am I in the streets of Sydney? Well, already that presupposes that who I am in the streets of Sydney is not the same person who I am in the streets of another city, or even the same person somewhere else in Sydney. And already this is a funny way of saying it, because I can't be in the present in Sydney and somewhere else at the same time. So just if I'm changing over time, if I'm a different person to who I was in the past, then of course I'm someone different on the streets of Sydney than I was on the streets of Lyon, for instance. Identity is something that sometimes I'm aware of. Sometimes I'm aware of my own identity, at least to some extent, and other times I'm not. But I think that it's always there. I think that there is always identity affecting us. It's just a matter of extent and way that it is. And you know, as I investigate this topic, and I think when I meet someone, oh, is this someone I could talk to about identity? And I ask people questions about identity and whether they would, you know, have something to say, whether they feel comfortable, whether they feel like they have something important to say, something valuable to say, something unique, something new to say. It's polarizing how some people feel like they know about their identity. Some people feel like they have something to say about identity, and other people don't. Other people say they haven't really thought about it, or I don't really have an identity. I'm not really in touch with my identity. Sometimes I think, why do I have a podcast on identity? There's not really much to say other than we are who we are, and we are who people tell us we are to some extent, and we are who we see ourselves. And you know, it's just, you know, I could just go around asking people like, who are you? And they would just fail to answer the question, and we would just get nowhere. And in the end, it would just be another art project like anything else where anyone is being interviewed, and this is not something special or new. And in many ways, that's true. But I think it's a new angle, and actually at other times, I think it's a huge, never-ending subject. I think about myself, and I'm like, what could I possibly say about identity? And then I realize I could make a whole fucking episode on who I am in the streets of Sydney. But I'm also like a million other things. Who I was 1 week ago today is different than who I was 2 weeks ago today. How could a conversation, how could a topic be so big and so small at the same time? I think that's how a lot of things are. Who am I in the streets of Sydney? Once or twice a day, I walk around in the streets of Sydney, and I listen to music, and I do a little dancing. I feel connected to my physical being amongst this strange city. It's like I go out into the city and I get connected with my physical nature. Feels pretty backwards. And I can only really do that if I like deeply exercise recently, whether that was the night before or the same day. But like to walk, it feels fucking stiff to me. because the body has so many different ways to move. So at crosswalks, when I'm waiting for the light, I usually get down on my hands and knees, and I do upward dog at least.
Do you want to get that?
But yeah, as long as I get that out of my system, that I moved my body in all the ways I felt like it should move, then I can enjoy my walk. Then it feels like a bonus. And I still stay in touch with like the more complicated physical, like with a little bit of jumping and a little bit of dancing, and sometimes dropping to the ground. I'm not so obviously a foreigner like I was in Turkey, Albania, or even my ancestral town in Italy. In Sydney, people don't say hi to each other in the streets. And I feel that they make friends with friends of friends, and maybe through events. So when I make eye contact with someone in the street, I don't quite talk to them. And even when the girls at the store compliment my earring or my piercing, I don't quite know how to move the conversation on. In Sydney, I have different influences in my ears. I'm listening to Bjork, who teaches me about love and acceptance and letting go, but also about keeping in mind the things that matter and finding that balance between fighting and letting the good things come. And some foreign language music that I slowly decipher over time, and when I do decipher some lyrics, they really are the only part of the song I understand, and they really sink in. And I love how the music, it keeps its mystery, but also its meaning. I have the influences of Giorgio Poi and Goldemund, who sing about mundane things in their own epic way. And I see that maybe the mundane is not so mundane in the way I understand it. And that freedom and fear are often unrecognizable and so stealthily hidden by society and even by ourselves. So who am I in the streets of Sydney? Well, it's kind of the place where ideas arise for the first time. So I think of my ideas as raw and not quite complete. So if I have a big idea and I want to act on it, I let myself sleep on it, and maybe sleep 2 nights on it, and maybe go for a walk again and think about it some more. Almost like this version of myself isn't quite the responsible version. So I identify as a spontaneous, untrustworthy, but creative, cool, confident. Like I'm getting closer to finding my true self. It's through an interesting mix of Bjork and Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, who I'm reading, that I understand that there's no right way to do life. And that being said, I should still be fighting to get closer to whatever that might be, to find that. Because there's nothing more important, even though it's impossible. I lose my faith in reason. I learn about the limits of pure reason. And I try to take back my connection to myself, to my emotions, to my intuition, to my desires. In Sydney, I'm learning to love my emotions and to love my love and desires. I consider that the effort I put into dominating my emotions, into controlling myself, to taming myself, has potentially been building myself a prison, and I'm looking for ways out of that. And the good thing is I have the freedom to do so. And I feel so freed that I take logic a little less seriously, and I allow myself to pull from different philosophies where I see them helping me. And it's as I get closer to being exactly who I am that I get further and further away from who I thought I was, from who I know myself to be. As I acknowledge that anything that I do or desire, am capable of, it's part of me. And it will always be part of me. So I can either hide from it, or I can find a way to love it and live with it. And I think that's the only way I'll ever be loved. And it's one thing to acknowledge that I want to follow my intuition, I want to follow my desires, I want to value my emotions. And it's another thing to know what they are. So I've been putting a lot of effort into learning about them, about myself. I've been writing a lot. I've been writing, and I never know what I'm gonna write. I never know what I'm gonna write, and that is such a skill that I've picked up almost here in Sydney, that I can sit down and start writing on command. And I don't think I'll ever learn exactly what I have to say. I'll never finish my ideas. And I'm learning to communicate them, and I'm learning to have the confidence to communicate things before they're finished. And it's in these moments that I try to violently attack who I am and everything I know myself to be. I question this world and everything I assume about it, how I fit into that, where the fuck I am, where the fuck I've been, where the fuck I'm going. How have the assumptions I made about the world and myself held me back? How has my fear of failure held me back? How have the lies I've been told and the lies I told myself kept me in my little fucking box? I try honestly to fuck up my identity but it doesn't work. I cling to who I am, who I think I am, who I've been. And little by little I escape, but damn, it's fucking hard. Like Socrates, I question. But unlike Socrates, I don't have the luxury of faith in reason. Faith in the future of philosophers. Who am I in the streets of Sydney?